Listen, we get it. It can be hard to keep track of and tell the difference between all the characters in Dragon Ball, since most of the fighters are a bunch of screamy buff boys with spiky hair. But hopefully we can clear up some confusion by breaking down all the Saiyan hairstyles and colors that have featured throughout the franchise. It's time for a Dragon Ball history lesson, folks, so pay attention. Let's start off with the Saiyans in their base form. When it comes to the biology of Saiyans, specifically with their hair, there's a lot to cover. In terms of pure-blooded Saiyans, most, if not all of them, have black hair, or at least very dark hair that's usually in some sort of spiky style. This isn't 100% true of every single Saiyan, but the majority of them have spiky hairstyles, with a few having no hair too short to be spiky, or hair that sits flat. Speaking of hairstyles of Saiyans in their base form, we learned through Vegeta's time in the hyperbolic time chamber that pure-blooded Saiyans keep their hairstyle and length from the day they are born, something he explicitly stated, and something that tracks when you look at Goku's transition from kid to adult, and the fact that neither his nor Vegeta's hair grew while they were in the time chamber. This means that a Saiyan's hair works a lot like an animal fur, stopping at a certain length. We also learned from the hyperbolic time chamber that Saiyans can grow facial hair. It just takes a long time, both because of the way their hair looks and because of their slow aging. The biological traits of keeping the same hairstyle and length, growing beards slowly, and having dark spiky hair doesn't always apply to the half-human, half-Saiyan hybrids of the series. In fact, none of this applies, and the traits of the half-Saiyan's hair work the same way as humans. It's either a combination of the parent's hair, or similar to specifically one of them. Let's take a look at Gohan. He had Goku's dark spiky hair, but it wasn't the same style. In fact, when he had it trimmed for his trip to Namek, it sat flat in a bowl cut, and as the series progressed, he'd have a number of different hairstyles, showing that it doesn't stick to one look. Trunks is similar, since he's had his mother's hair, and Goten, though originally looking like a clone of Goku, would eventually grow his hair out to a mullet in the Peaceful World saga, showing that he, like the other half-Saiyans, don't follow the same hair rules as the full-blooded Saiyans. As any fan of the Dragon Ball series knows, when a Saiyan goes Super, their hair changes significantly. The most obvious change is that it turns gold, and in the case of some Saiyans, their hair also sticks upright. We say some because in the case of Vegeta and Gohan, their hair is already sticking up and doesn't change style when going Super, it just turns gold. The first time we saw the Super Saiyan form was during the Frieza saga, when Goku's rage at the death of Krillin drove him to transform into the warrior of Saiyan legend. Up until this point, no one was really sure what an actual Super Saiyan looked like, as Vegeta just believed it to be a status of power rather than a transformation, as seen when he thought himself to be one after a few power-ups, and when he later thought the same of Goku. However, it became very clear what a Super Saiyan actually was when Goku's hair changed color and style, establishing a new look for the character and a new hairstyle for Saiyans. As we mentioned earlier, the way that Super Saiyans transform affects a Saiyan's hair, and it's different for every Saiyan. For Goku, his hair stands straight up on top, turning gold, and the same thing happens to Goten's hair. For Gohan, who had long hair when he first transformed, it stuck up a little bit, but not as much as Goku's did. And when he later had his hair cut, it just turned gold. For Vegeta, since his hair already stands up, it just turns gold when transforming. For Trunks, on the other hand, his straight purple bowl-cut hair transforms into chunky and upright blonde spikes upon going Super. Most fans of the series, even those who are vaguely familiar with Dragon Ball, know about this particular Saiyan hairstyle. But did you know the reason why? Well, we don't actually know the biological in-story reason, but we do know why Toriyama decided to make Super Saiyans have gold hair. It was because he wanted to give his inking assistant less work. So instead of filling in Goku's hair with black ink, he could leave it in white in the original manga, a tiny decision that ended up changing the series. During the Cell Saga, Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks all attempted to push the Super Saiyan form past its limits to create an even stronger form. This resulted in a couple of different subsequent sort of new forms after Super Saiyan that weren't quite fully new transformations. The only major transformation that resulted from these experimentations with the Super Saiyan form were larger muscles, and in the case of future Trunks, even spikier hair. But this could also be a result of his hair being longer. Regardless, the point is that there was no real addition to the different types of Saiyan hairstyles until Gohan fully pushed past the Super Saiyan form to become an Ascended Super Saiyan, a transformation that will later become known as Super Saiyan 2. The Super Saiyan 2 form isn't too far in appearance from regular Super Saiyan. The Saiyan's hair is still gold and spiky, it's just much more spiky. It's not a crazy difference. In fact, the series poked fun at this idea when Babidi stated he didn't see any difference between Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2. But if you look closely, you can see what makes a Super Saiyan's hair and a Super Saiyan 2 hair is different. With Gohan, the hair went from being a gold version of his base form style to a giant mess of spikes all facing upward. Spikes that were far less chunky and much skinnier, making Gohan look like he had french fries on his head. The difference is a lot less clear with the likes of Goku and Vegeta, but it's still there. For Goku, his hair becomes much stiffer, and the bangs that hang down in his Super Saiyan form almost all go upwards. As for Vegeta, his hair also becomes stiffer, and the spikes become far more pronounced, rather than a vague mass of floofy, upwards-facing gold hair that he has in his regular Super Saiyan form. This is also how Gohan's hair looked when he was a teenager and went Super Saiyan 2, since he had just plain short, spiky hair, so the difference between his Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan 2 forms become much less prominent. Again, it's not a crazy difference, but when breaking down all his Saiyan hairstyles, we can't skip over the tiny details, can we? It could be argued that the first Super Saiyan 3 transformation in Dragon Ball is one of the main sources of those who haven't seen the series boiling it down to a giant, ridiculous blonde hair and lots of screaming. Whether or not this is true, there's no denying that the Super Saiyan 3 form is pretty ridiculous looking. Don't get us wrong, it's still pretty badass, but come on, just look at that hair, it's bonkers. But enough joking around, since the Super Saiyan 3 form is yet another significant entry in the long list of crazy Dragon Ball hairstyles, it's time to break it down and explain everything about it. Like the Super Saiyan 2, the Super Saiyan 3 form was the result of ascending past Super Saiyan, and then pushing even farther to ascend once more. Goku was able to accomplish this form while training with King Kai in the afterlife, and the form puts much more strain on a living person. The form is definitely powerful, but we're not looking at power. We're looking at hairstyles, and Super Saiyan 3's hairstyle is, it sure is something. Rather than just turning a Saiyan's hair more upward and more prominent spikes, Super Saiyan 3 extends a Saiyan's hair to great lengths, jutting out into chunky spikes until it reaches past their waist. The result is a massive mane of glowing gold spikes. But the golden mullet isn't the only change to a Saiyan's hair that the form causes. It also gets rid of some of their hair, specifically their eyebrows. As you can see, Goku's brow is hairless in the form, giving him an ape-like appearance and leaving us with questions about where exactly his eyebrows go during the transformation. Regardless, Goku isn't the only Saiyan to achieve this form. Gotenks, as well as others in non-canon material, was able to turn Super Saiyan 3 after perfecting fusion, gaining a much more smooth arc of spiky hair when he skipped over Super Saiyan 2 to the ridiculous-looking Super Saiyan 3. Seriously, the form looks pretty cool on Goku, but Gotenks, a weird-looking buff boy? Yeah, it's one of the most weird-looking designs. It's not bad, it's just no child should ever look like that. Between the end of Dragon Ball Z and the return of the franchise via Dragon Ball Z, Battle of Gods, and eventually Dragon Ball Super, there weren't any new forms added to the franchise, so no new hairstyles. Sorry, folks. Well, there were some things from a certain series that fans don't like to talk about, but those aren't considered canon these days, so we're gonna skip on ahead to Super Saiyan God. Super Saiyan God was, as mentioned, a form introduced in Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, which was later retold in Dragon Ball Super, while the transformation being a temporary form of godhood was criticized for going against Goku not being interested in divinity, as seen when he refused Kami's offer to take his job as Guardian of Earth in the Piccolo Jr. saga. It's still a pretty interesting transformation. Rather than being a form achieved through training, in order for a Saiyan to become a Super Saiyan God, they must borrow the Super Saiyan power of 5 other Saiyans. With this power, Goku was transformed into a Super Saiyan God, but the changes in appearance were much different than previous forms. The Super Saiyan God form resulted in Goku's eyes turning red, leaving his pupils black, unlike Super Saiyan 1 and 2, which turns Saiyan's eyes completely greenish-blue. This form also affected Goku's body, slimming his muscles down to be more toned and streamlined. Additionally, Goku appeared to look quite a bit younger, likely meant to reflect the eternal youth that a god might have. As for the focus of this video, the hairstyle changes that comes with the Super Saiyan God form were also significantly different from past Super Saiyan forms. Instead of his hair sticking straight up, Goku's hairstyle remained the same, only changing color to the same shade of red as his eyes. All those appearance changes were the same when Vegeta finally turned Super Saiyan God for the first time in the anime, during his fight with Broly in Dragon Ball Super Broly. The Super Saiyan God form, as mixed as fans might be on it, deserves credit for trying something new, a unique approach that wasn't exactly taken with the next form that was introduced in the series, which didn't change much from the usual hairstyles of the series. After Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, there was one more film prior to the announcement and premiere of Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F. The film and the Dragon Ball Super saga that adapted and canonized it depicted the return of Frieza, who is now stronger than ever, both in his final form and because of his new temporary transformation, Golden Frieza. With his return to life and the new power he obtained by training, Frieza sought to get revenge on Goku and the planet he called home, showing up to challenge both him and Vegeta. While it seemed like Frieza was stronger and more frightening than ever, Goku and Vegeta didn't come to fight unarmed, so to speak. We're talking about the fact that Vegeta and Goku, who had been training with Whis to master Godly Ki, had developed the Super Saiyan Blue form, originally known as Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan Blue is the result of both Goku and Vegeta obtaining Super Saiyan Godhood, holding on to that godly ki, then channeling it through their base form, going Super Saiyan to create an all-new Super Saiyan form that gives us even more hairstyles that break down and explain. Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan was renamed to Super Saiyan Blue for one reason: the fact that this new form turns a Super Saiyan's hair blue in color. Other than this, the hairstyle that comes with the form is identical to the regular Super Saiyan form, just colored blue. However, there is an offshoot to this form that also must be discussed: Super Saiyan Rosé. This is a form exclusive to Goku Black, who had the soul and energy of Zamasu, a supreme Kai. With his godly ki filtered through a Saiyan's body, Goku Black's Super Saiyan form resulted in pink hair. Also worth mentioning is the fact that when fused with Zamasu, Goku's Super Saiyan hairstyle was applied to their fusion, resulting in him having Zamasu's white hair color and Super Saiyan Goku's hairstyle. Okay, we don't blame you if you had some trouble following on with this one. The breakdown of Super Saiyan forms combined with godly ki and the hairstyles that resulted from it are kind of all over the place. That about does it for the main Saiyan hairstyles that have been featured throughout the Dragon Ball franchise, but there are still a few loose ends to cover in the category of canon Saiyan hairstyles. Going in order of appearance, there's the Grade 8 form, which gives all Saiyan the same exact hair with a bit of variation here and there. Specifically, a Saiyan's body hair grows and spreads everywhere, covering them as their body transforms into a giant muscular beast. Additionally, the top of a Grade 8's head is a spiky hairstyle that comes to a point, with the Vegeta's form having somewhat more pronounced spikes. Next, there's Gohan's ultimate form, which, while not a form specific to Saiyans, still resulted in his hair changing. There's also the hairstyles that resulted from fusions. Goten and Trunks basically have Vegeta's hairstyle as Gotenks, but with the sides being colored purple like Trunks' hair. As for Vegito, the fusion's hairstyle is straight up like Vegeta's, but with Goku's spiky bangs, the color being slightly more brown than either of theirs are. Gogeta's hair is exactly the same as Vegito's, just without the slight brown coloring. Fast forward to Dragon Ball Super and we have Goku's Ultra Instinct form. This is another transformation that's not exclusive to Saiyans, but due to the fact that a Saiyan's hair changes with their power, Goku's hair turns silver when he mastered the technique, but that's just our theory. We also have Broly's various hair changes, which are separate from the mainline Saiyan forms and their hairstyles, since Broly is a legendary Super Saiyan. First, there's his wrathful form, which gives him the power of the Grade 8 form without transforming, but his hair does stand up straight and expand into fuller spikes. Then there's his regular Super Saiyan form, which turns his wrathful hairstyle gold, and finally his legendary Super Saiyan form, which pushes his hair spikes to crazy lengths and directions and adding a green tint to his hair color. Additionally, Broly's legendary Super Saiyan hair is almost identical to Kale's Berserker Super Saiyan hair. Kale also has different hair when she masters her Berserker form, the spikes being much less prominent. Last and to some least, we have the non-canon Saiyan transformations and their coinciding hairstyles. Though these aren't a part of the series' main canon, we decided to go through them to fully break down all the Saiyan hairstyles in the Dragon Ball franchise. First up on the list is the Pseudo Super Saiyan, a form and hairstyle that has an interesting story behind it. The Pseudo Super Saiyan form appeared only in the first Dragon Ball Z Lord Slug, where Goku became enraged, his anger giving him a power-up in the final fight against the titular villain. The pseudo transformation was originally intended to be a Super Saiyan, and was referred to as such, but since the film it appeared in came out before the Dragon Ball manga had finished the Frieza saga, the real Super Saiyan form was eventually revealed. So this false form was renamed. Like Super Saiyan, this form turned Goku's hair upward, but without the stiffness and color change. Next, there's the Super Saiyan 4, which originated in the now non-canon Dragon Ball GT. It's fair to say that fans are a bit mixed on this transformation. Some agree that it's badass and has a cool design, and almost everyone agrees that it's strange, and it doesn't really fit as the fourth incarnation of the Super Saiyan form. Unlike previous Super Saiyan forms, Super Saiyan 4 gave Goku his black hair back, increasing its length so it hangs downward at the edges and reaches the middle of Goku's back, doing almost the exact same for Vegeta. It also gave Goku his eyebrows back from Super Saiyan 3 and covered his body with red fur, save for his pecs and parts of his abs, once again doing the same for Vegeta. Super Saiyan 4 wasn't the only form that Dragon Ball GT introduced. It also gave us the Golden Grade Ape form, which was exactly the same hairstyle as a regular Grade Ape, just golden in color. Additionally, during the Baby Saga, Vegeta was possessed by the titular villain, resulting in his hair becoming white in some forms, curving upward into a weird shape in one of his final forms, a style that was retained when Baby Vegeta went Golden Grade Ape, the color changing to match the gold fur of the form.
Dragon Ball has a lot of villains, each one stronger than the last. Overall, the major shows in the franchise, Goku and the gang have faced off against alien dictators, martial arts generals, robots, gods of destruction, and even more robots. So today in this video, we're going to take a look at some of the villains in Dragon Ball history, and put them in a pecking order to find out who's the strongest out of all. The thing about the original Dragon Ball was that it focused heavily on martial arts. The only human to be on this list is the baddest, strongest martial artist Goku will ever face in the original Dragon Ball. General Tao of the Red Ribbon Army is a force to be reckoned with as far as human characters in Dragon Ball are concerned. While he may be the weakest on this list, he still managed to kill a man with nothing but his tongue. Major props for that feat. After he was defeated by Goku, he underwent a transformation into a heartless killing machine, complete with weapons. But the technology of the time just couldn't help raise General Tao higher up on this list. King Piccolo came at the very end of the original Dragon Ball, which was when things were really beginning to get otherworldly. The Demon King came to wreak havoc for Goku and the gang, along with his son Piccolo Jr., who would later just be known as Piccolo. While we know now that Piccolo is a Namekian and not a demon, it was truly terrifying for everyone to face this great threat. His list of accomplishments will go down as killing both Krillin and Shenron, which in all honesty should put him higher on this list, but the power level of the Eternal Dragon hasn't really been looked into, so the jury is still out on that. Here we go, the first villain of Dragon Ball Z, and the first evil Saiyan we see in the franchise. Well, technically we saw Kid Vegeta, but that doesn't count. Raditz is Goku's older brother and comes to recruit him to take Earth over with him as part of his mission as a Saiyan warrior under Lord Frieza. Goku refuses, which goes about as well as you'd expect when dealing with an evil brother. While the fight between Goku, Piccolo, and Raditz is fun, Goku is pushed to his limits, and the special beam cannon is what does him in. A powerful attack, sure, but it's not Kamehameha. Following this trend, we have the second villainous Saiyan in the series, Nappa. He was the muscle for Prince Vegeta, even though Vegeta was much stronger than him. He dealt with all of the rabble, while Vegeta saved his strength for Goku. While Nappa dealt with all the grunt work, Vegeta sat on his laurels and watched the massacre ensue. Nappa single-handedly wiped out the Z-Fighters, well, except for Yamcha. Poor Yamcha. In any case, Nappa was a formidable opponent to the weaker fighters, but couldn't even land a good hit on Goku and was taken out with ease. A good lackey, but a subpar villain. Should he be given a second chance? We don't know, but he's alright in Dragon Ball FighterZ, we guess. You'd think that the father of both Frieza and Cooler would be ultra powerful, right? I mean, it makes sense, especially since Frieza was so naturally strong, but you'd be wrong. King Cold may talk a big game, but he's a bit of a pushover. After Frieza is rebuilt with spare parts and scrap, he and King Cold land on Earth to try and finish off Goku and friends. But before the ship's even cooled from landing, they're stopped by future Trunks, the sword-wielding Saiyan. He manages to cut Frieza to ribbons and make minced meat out of his men. We at least have an idea of what Frieza can do, but we don't see anything from King Cold. He's cut down without much of a fight. Perhaps one of the most famous movie villains in the franchise, Garlic Jr., is an interesting character. He shows up to wreak havoc in the Dead Zone, but he also manages to come back post-Frieza to cause even more trouble. His main goal centers around the Lookout and beef with Kami, claiming the Lookout is actually his, and Kami stole it from him. While he may not be huge in terms of power, Garlic Jr. is the only character in the franchise to realistically attain immortality through the Dragon Balls, something Vegeta and Frieza have tried and failed to do. Even though Garlic Jr. is immortal, he was still beaten by Gohan, Piccolo, and Krillin. Goku didn't even need to fight him. What? How can the Prince of all Saiyans be so low on this list? Well, we're including him on this list when he first appeared on Earth, when he was arguably at his weakest. During the Saiyan saga, Vegeta was undeniably a bad guy. He was there to get the Dragon Balls and wipe out anybody in his way. Since then, however, he's been either an anti-hero or a straight-up good guy. Even when he was Majin Vegeta, it was purely to obtain power and defeat Goku. That may be a bad move, but Vegeta had a few redeeming qualities about him before then. Plus, we'd really hate for him to take up 2 spots on this list. Everyone's favorite band of color-coded alien Power Ranger knockoffs have made it into this list. The Ginyu Force is a group of elite soldiers fighting for Lord Frieza. But considering how they're so low on this list, they don't really stack up. Sure, during their prime on Namek, they managed to take out Vegeta, but once Goku came into the scene, they couldn't even land a hit on him. They might as well have been a team of Nappas for how effective they are at taking out secondary characters, but are just elevated grunts. They even get their butts handed to them when they arrive on King Kai's planet after they die. Being bested by Yamcha is a fate worse than death. Of course, the captain of the elite Ginyu force and the team's namesake has to be at least marginally stronger than the rest of the team. Captain Ginyu, the power-posing flamboyant leader, isn't as big of a pushover as the rest of his team. He has a respectable power level, but also has the unique ability to switch bodies with his opponent, a technique he uses frequently. Of course, it was this free use of his body swapping that led to his downfall after he switched bodies with a frog on Namek. He comes back in Dragon Ball Super when he changes bodies with another Frieza grunt, but that's about all to his character. The guy likes switching bodies and striking poses. So we're gonna dig into the robots, and boy are we starting out with a good one. Android 16 is part of the trio with Android 17 and 18. He is the stoic red-headed stepchild of the bunch, fabled to be modeled after Gero's son. His one task, like most of the other androids, was eliminating Goku. However, what set him apart from his siblings was that he was completely robotic, where 17 and 18 were humans with cybernetic enhancements. Android 16 is in a fitting place because he's a powerful robot. He took on First Form Cell after devouring thousands of people and managed to rip off his tail, which, if you watch that scene again, it's pretty brutal. We have a lot of androids to go through, and, well, this is a weird one. Android 19 can be described aptly as a fat, white, clown-like robot. I'm not sure if there's a benefit to having a fat robot, but despite this android's odd shape and look, it did pack quite a wallop. Android 19 worked with Dr. Gero when they began their attack on the world. The Z-Fighters mistake them for the androids Trunks warned about, but in that short time, the two managed to do a lot of damage. Heck, Android 19 even manages to down Goku. To be fair, that may also have to do with the heart virus plaguing him, but a win is a win, I guess. Dr. Gero proves that true power comes from brains and brawn. He's the madman behind all the major androids in the Dragon Ball series, including Android 16, 17, 18, 19, and Cell. When he couldn't think of anything else, he turned himself into an android. How did he do it? Well, we don't really know, but the fact he pulled it off proves he's a very intelligent being. In addition to those big old brains of his, he has managed to outsmart nearly all the Z-Fighters and elude them, which, come to think of it, may not be that hard. But it's strategic to say the least. In the end, Gero was done in by his own creations, such as the way of a mad scientist. Now, this one might seem like an odd pick, but hear us out. Zarbon was Frieza's right-hand man during the Namek arc, and managed to down Vegeta. Out of all of Frieza's henchmen, he has lasted the longest, even as long as the Ginyu Force. Aside from his usefulness as a henchman, Zarbon's powers were not to be taken lightly. Like any good villain, he can transform into a more powerful form. Out of the two lackeys Frieza had with him, Dodoria and Zarbon, Zarbon was the more capable of the two, and managed to hold down the fort and help gather the Dragon Balls for his employer and ruler. This makes Zarbon a great fighter and company man. We begin dipping into Dragon Ball Super, the latest iteration of the Dragon Ball franchise. The first round of Dragon Ball Super has ended, and with its ending, we can look back and wonder of the many fights and tournaments which fighters really shone brightly here. One fighter who managed to sneak in and take this spot is one that many wouldn't consider powerful, but like with Dr. Gero, power also comes with intellect. Frost, a fighter who looks a lot like Blue Frieza, managed to best both Goku and Piccolo with the use of poisoned needles. A truly despicable move if we're being honest. But when you're in a tournament, you make do with what you got. Now we're getting to some memorable fights with some awesome powers. Hit was the top fighter in the Destroyer tournament between Champa and Beerus. He could hit his opponent by moving forward in time by fractions of an inch. In his fight with Vegeta, nobody could tell what was going on. Even Beerus needed to pay attention to keep track of his moves. In the end, like always, it was up to Goku to figure out how to even challenge Hit. It was an intense match, forcing Goku to unveil his Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken technique, which wasn't even enough. Ultimately, Goku intentionally forfeited that match, hoping to someday challenge Hit at his full power. Android 17 is the cool android, no doubt about it. His attitude, his look, and everything just exudes cool. These next two entries can be interchangeable, but one needed to go before the other. Android 17 is the male half of the dynamic duo 17 and 18, and he's a tour de force all his own. When he first walked onto the scene, he kicked Dr. Gero's head clean off and could take on any of the Z-Fighters at their current level during the Android saga. He was just as strong as 18 and was a vital part of Cell's transformation. Even in future Trunks' timeline, they're unmatched and completely take over the world. Where one enters, the other follows. Android 18 has all the qualities of 17, but with the added benefit of kicking more butt on screen than 17. Fans of Dragon Ball Z will remember her fight with Vegeta where she manages to break both his arms and completely humiliate him. So much so that she beats the blonde right out of him. In the future Trunks timeline, she's a ruthless killing machine and takes particular pleasure in eliminating Gohan. We know she'll eventually go on to marry Krillin and settle down, but to be honest, that just makes her much more powerful when at any point in time she can just step back into the fighting ring and dominate. Spoiler alert, she totally does. A lot of shows have a pure evil character, a character that's the manifestation of evil or some allegory to Satan. Well, Dragon Ball already has a Satan and a Demon Lord, so for Janemba, he's an incarnation of pure evil. And boy oh boy does this guy show it. Making his main debut in the Dragon Ball Z movie Fusion Reborn, Janemba is what happens when you slack off on the job and don't notice a soul cleansing machine going off and exploding, coating you in pure evil. The resulting entity wants nothing more than chaos and destruction, and has the power to do it. It takes the seldom used Gogeta to take him down and end his reign of madness. What could be more powerful than a being of pure evil? An absolute force of nature like the Pink Wonder himself, Majin Buu. Now, there are a lot of forms to Buu, but the most powerful form is Kid Buu, the pure and original form of Majin Buu. With the temperament of a spoiled child and the power of a destructive god, Majin Buu was nearly unstoppable. For Buu, fighting and destruction are just part of nature. There's no rhyme or reason for any of it, which means there's nothing holding Buu back, and no reason for him to ever stop. It took a lot to stop him, including a new level of Super Saiyan. You know, we couldn't forget Mr. Perfect Cell, the android everyone forgets about because he's so much more. Cell is the amalgamation of everything the series was during his time. He was made from DNA collected from all the fighters, including Goku, Piccolo, and Vegeta, even Frieza. Cell's power and carnage is perhaps one of the highest points in the original Dragon Ball Z run. His quest to become perfect requires a large amount of people to be absorbed, the biggest pieces being Android 17 and 18. The Cell games were a de facto finale to the saga we knew and loved. Sure, we have the Buu saga, but the amount of effort needed to end Cell and finally defeat him would make a fitting endgame. With all the different aliens, robots, and alien robots that we've seen thrown at Goku, the one he couldn't beat was himself. Well, it's not technically Goku, but Goku Black is the form a Supreme Kai named Zamasu took in order to wipe out all life along with a future version of himself. Given all the powers of a Supreme Kai and Goku, he was unstoppable since he gained all the powers of a Saiyan, which gives him more power the more he transforms. In the end, Goku couldn't stop future Zamasu and had to summon Zeno, the king of every universe, to erase Zamasu from existence. You'd think this guy would be number one, but amazingly, there are 4 more powerful villains to go. The legendary Super Saiyan Broly, the strongest Saiyan to ever exist. He isn't just an ordinary Saiyan, but a legend that only appears once every 1,000 years, making him a force beyond all else. Broly's history has been long, and for the most part tedious. He's been featured in 3 movies known as the Broly Triple Threat, but it's never been made canon in any of the shows. That all changed when Dragon Ball Super came around and the idea of a legendary Super Saiyan was made canon. Kale was the first Saiyan to officially turn legendary Super Saiyan in one of the shows. Later on, Broly would also be made canon in the most recent movie, Dragon Ball Super Broly. Perhaps the most famous villain on this list deserves to be this high up. Some might be quick to point out Frieza's fluctuating power and the fact that he's been beaten by Goku many times, but the full extent of Frieza's strength has yet to be fully realized. If we go all the way back to before the Namek Saga, we learn that Frieza can easily destroy worlds without transforming into his other forms. Up until Dragon Ball Super, Frieza has been naturally strong. So strong that in just 4 short months, he's able to attain a form that's just as strong as Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan. Taking all this into account, Frieza is the perfect rival for someone like Goku. In our number 2 spot is everyone's favorite god of destruction, Beerus the Purple Kitty Cat Man. He presides over Universe 7 and takes Goku and Vegeta under his wing to train. However, it didn't begin like this. Beerus isn't strictly a villain, but more of a force of nature like Buu, only a whole lot more intelligent by comparison. Beerus's duty is to destroy, and that makes him a bit more immoral than just some unthinking being who wants to destroy for the heck of it. It's in the job description. Still, the force that ultimately stops Beerus from being a nasty villain is his laziness. Even with his near infinite power, Beerus really only destroys when he feels he has to, or if he's bored. You probably had a feeling this was coming. The one mortal being who has the potential to surpass even a god of destruction, Jiren. For the purposes of this list, Jiren isn't an evil being, and most wouldn't label him as a villain. But they'd probably say he's an antagonist, someone who works against the main character, who in this case would be Goku. But during the last fight in the Tournament of Power, it took absolutely everything to barely beat Jiren. Goku, Frieza, Android 17, Vegeta, everyone at their very top level just to beat Jiren. The fact that he has the power to beat a destroyer puts him at the top of the list, and it's unlikely to change anytime soon. The kids of Dragon Ball might not get that much attention, but they used to be a big part of the series. Both because Goku was a kid at the beginning of the franchise and because Gohan was very close to becoming the main character of the series. Suffice it to say, the younger characters of Dragon Ball are pretty important, even if it might not seem like it these days. So let's look at the things they have in common. Starting us off, we have one of the weirdest parts of Dragon Ball, the fact that kids seem to age in the weirdest way possible. Goku was the first example of this, since prior to showing up as an adult in the Piccolo Jr. saga, he stayed his short, chonky self for about 6 years straight. Gohan aged pretty strangely too, but Goten and Trunks are definitely the worst offenders of this, since they've been eternally 7 and 8 for like the last 4 years in Dragon Ball time. Seriously, why do they still act and look like little kids despite both being teenagers come the time of the Tournament of Power? One could chalk all these examples up to Saiyans having weird aging, but then there's one other example that throws this theory out the window. Marin. Krillin and Android 18's daughter is basically the same age and size that she was in the Buu saga, despite quite a bit of time passing. In fact, she acts the same too, being treated like a toddler by her parents despite being almost 10 years old by the time of Super's final arc. So, what's the deal? Why do all the kids in Dragon Ball have to age so weirdly? Just by the nature of the series, all the children that have been featured throughout Dragon Ball come from powerful parents. The series is about a bunch of powerful fighters after all, so it makes sense that all the children of the series come from these powerful fighters. But it's still an interesting pattern that every child of the main cast in Dragon Ball has at least one powerful parent. So, let's study it a bit. Starting with Goku, since he was a kid for the majority of Dragon Ball, he comes from 2 Saiyan parents. While Bardock wasn't the strongest Saiyan on planet Vegeta, he was still strong enough to be part of the warrior class. And when compared to humans, he's a pretty strong guy. Goku himself ended up being incredibly strong, having Gohan later in life, thus acting as the powerful parent. Gohan also serves this role to Pan, being the source of her power potential. Goten, Trunks, and Bulla also fall under this category, since Goku and Vegeta are literally the strongest main characters in the series. Marin also surprisingly fits here as well, since Krillin and Android 18 are the strongest human and one of the strongest androids in the series respectively. When Gohan was first introduced to the franchise, he had a tail just like Goku did as a kid. Soon after, we'd see that also like his father, Gohan could turn into a great ape upon looking at the moon's light. Because of this, Piccolo both destroyed the moon and cut off Gohan's tail. A bit overkill, sure, but it prevented Gohan from going nuts in the future. After Gohan, however, we never saw another Saiyan-human hybrid with a tail. Akira Toriyama stated the reason behind this was that he just forgot about tails, and had explained it away as them being a recessive trait. This wouldn't exactly make sense. If Gohan had a tail, then Goten would likely have one as well. Regardless, the point is that all half Saiyans that came after Gohan were never seen with tails, implying they never had them, or they were cut off at an early age to prevent any great ape shenanigans. Bulla, the latest half Saiyan in the series, also lacks a tail. However, it's unclear whether this was a genetic thing or if Whis just automatically removed it when he magically delivered her. Heck, even Pan can be put into this category, lacking a tail despite being part Saiyan. To those who aren't fans of the Dragon Ball franchise, we can understand how easy it is to get all the characters confused. For one thing, the main cast is basically just a bunch of buff dudes with spiky black hair that are all relatively indiscernible from each other. Another thing that'd make it confusing for newcomers is the fact that quite a few characters have very similar names. This is especially true of the kid characters of the series, who all have names that are very similar to their parents. Take a look at Goku. On top of his Saiyan name being based on a vegetable, just like his father, his Earth name shares a prefix with his adoptive grandfather, Gohan. Vegeta, who we recently saw as a kid in Dragon Ball Super Broly, is a much more extreme case, since he's the latest in a long line of Saiyans named Vegeta. The Earth kids aren't any different, since Gohan was named after Grandpa Gohan and also shares a prefix with Goku, just like Goten. Marin also fits this rule, since her name translates to chestnut like her father's does. Trunks and Bulla follow this same pattern as well, since like their mother, they're named after undergarments. During the Cell Saga, it was becoming clear that Goku was stepping back as the series' main protagonist, with Gohan taking his place. This was made more evident by the Buu Saga, which put Gohan at the center of the story in the beginning, and gave him an epic confrontation with the saga's main villain. However, as we all know, Gohan eventually fell to the sidelines as Goku showed up and finished Buu off in the final moments of the saga, putting him back in the center of the series for both the end of Dragon Ball Z and all of Dragon Ball Super. Speaking of Dragon Ball Super, the series was pretty quick to sideline all of the kids in the franchise. Now, it's not like Marin, Pan, or Bulla were going to be the main characters or anything, but it's pretty surprising that Goten and Trunks were completely sidelined in Super, since they were the focus of a big part of the Buu Saga, their fusion being the world's only hope at one point. But Dragon Ball Super put all the younger characters on the bench in favor of focusing on Goku and Vegeta during every single saga. Then again, future Trunks still got his own saga in Super. All of the warrior characters who've been seen as kids throughout Dragon Ball have one major thing in common. They've all competed in tournaments. It sounds obvious when you recall that tournaments have been a major part of the series since early on in the original Dragon Ball. But when you lay it all out, it's actually pretty interesting that every warrior kid of the franchise has competed in, or at least entered one or more tournaments. Let's start with Goku and Krillin, who first entered the World Martial Arts Tournament as kids, later as teenagers, and then as young adults. Gohan continued the legacy by both competing in and winning the Cell Games, and by entering the World Martial Arts Tournament during the Buu Saga. Trunks and Goten were also there, but they competed in the newly established Kids Division, and they're not the only kids of Saiyans to have competed, since in the epilogue of Dragon Ball Z, Pan managed to decimate the competition, despite being only 4 years old. This next one doesn't pertain to all the kids of Dragon Ball, but it's still a pretty interesting pattern to look at. If you notice, all the second-born Saiyan kids tend to look exactly like one of their parents. We're not talking about bearing a resemblance either. Literally every second-born Saiyan kid in the series is an exact copy of one of their parents. Let's look at the first example of this. Goku. As a kid, Goku looked nothing like his grandfather, and when we eventually learned that he was an alien, we knew why. We also learned that he had an older brother, one who didn't look all that much like him. However, Goku did look exactly like their father, Bardock. The hair is the biggest similarity, but as adults, both characters look identical. When Goku eventually had a second son, we found he looked exactly like Goku did as a kid. So much so that when Goku first met Goten, he said there was a little him hiding behind Chi-Chi. This pattern also applies to Bulma and Vegeta's second-born, Bulla, who we've seen as a teenager in the non-canon Dragon Ball GT, where she appears to be the spitting image of her mother. In the world of Dragon Ball, it's theorized and somewhat confirmed that Saiyan hybrids are actually stronger than full-blooded Saiyans. The reasoning behind this is that the kinder a Saiyan is, the stronger they can become, and with the kindness of humans within them, half-Saiyan, half-human hybrids have had much stronger potential, a concept that has been all but confirmed by Gohan, Goten, and Trunks' high power levels at young ages. And speaking of hybrids, one major thing that the kids of Dragon Ball have in common is that all of them are hybrids in some way. Disregarding young Goku and Krillin in Dragon Ball, you'll find that every modern child character in the franchise is a hybrid of some kind. Let's take another look at all the warrior kids of Dragon Ball, since putting them all together helps to point out anything that they all have in common on top of competing in tournaments. Of course, we're talking about the fact that all the fighter kids in Dragon Ball have faced major villains. In early Dragon Ball, it was Goku who faced all the major villains in that series, but Krillin also fought against Piccolo in the final saga of the series. Fast forward to Dragon Ball Z, and Gohan ended up facing nearly every single villain, fighting Raditz, standing on the same battlefield as Nappa, facing Vegeta as a great ape, fighting against the Ginyu Force, holding his own against Frieza, battling the androids in an alternate timeline, defeating Cell, and completely overpowering Buu. Seriously, that's an impressive list of accomplishments, and he's not the only kid who faces major villains, since Trunks and Goten fought against Buu as Gotenks, and Pan sort of fought against the Pilaf gang. Though dealing with them is probably more accurate, since they didn't put up much of a fight. Regardless, it's still worth pointing out that all the warrior kids of Dragon Ball have faced a major series villain. This next one only pertains to the San family kids, meaning Goku and his sons. Of course, we're talking about the fact that Goku, Gohan, and Goten have all ridden on the Flying Nimbus as kids. Heck, even Chi-Chi rode on it as a kid, so the whole family are Cloud Riders. Goku was obviously the first to ride the flying Nimbus, as it was gifted to him by Master Roshi. Nimbus then became Goku's main method of transportation until he became a fast flyer who had no need for the cloud. Prior to that, however, Gohan was seen riding the Nimbus with his father in the first episode of Dragon Ball Z. After Goku's death, Gohan continued to ride the Nimbus as a means of commuting to school, eventually gifting the cloud to Goten when he gained his Great Saiyaman costume to disguise himself when flying. Goten then used the flying Nimbus to get around, since he didn't know how to fly until Gohan taught him. After Goten learned to fly, it appeared that the flying Nimbus was put away, never appearing again. That is until Goku called upon it once more when training in the Forest of Terror in a very cute reunion. While we wouldn't call Gohan being kidnapped by a green alien cushy, there's no denying that all of the kids that debuted in DBZ and Super had pretty easy lives, especially compared to the lives of their parents. Gohan is probably the only next-generation kid who doesn't fall into this category, since he had to face literally every major villain in the series, but following that, he, as well as all the other kids in the franchise, appear to have relatively easy lives. This sort of ties into the fact that most of the kids of the series have been sidelined in Super, since they don't have any reason to be a part of the action, so they just, hang out and do whatever, as seen by Trunks, who's the son of the richest woman in the world, his spoiled brat attitude reflecting this. Heck, even though Gohan did end up becoming a fighter, there are two things that define him as someone with a tamer upbringing: his homeschooling and his current living situation. He eventually became a scholar who married into the Mr. Satan family, both of which contributed to him going a bit soft prior to the Golden Frieza saga. This next one is something that applies to all warriors in Dragon Ball Z, but it still counts as a pattern for all warrior kids as well. Of course, we're talking about the fact that every warrior kid in the series has a master that helped train them. In fact, all of them also have a master that wasn't their parent. Going down the list, we have Goku, whose first teacher was his adoptive grandfather and Master Roshi, the latter of whom also trained Krillin. Next, there's Gohan, whose first master was Piccolo, future Trunks, who trained under future Gohan, Goten, who trained under Gohan after his mother taught him the basics, and later Piccolo, who also trained Kid Trunks. It's a pretty interesting pattern, to say the least, and one of the things that makes the series so great, since it shows that wisdom and guidance can come from anywhere, including the tutelage of your father's former greatest enemy. But it's a good thing Vegeta only taught Trunks to fight, since if he was the one who took Gohan under his wing as a kid, then the series would have been very different. But we can't say we wouldn't be interested in that alternate timeline, because we would. Remember earlier how we pointed out that all secondborns in the series look exactly like one of their parents? Well, that's not the only genetic rule that the kids of the series follow, since even those who aren't identical to their parents have some majorly similar traits. Starting with Gohan, he has spiky black hair very similar to his father's, that along with his tail, Goku's friends were quick to point out. Next up, there's Trunks, who has his mother's hair. Sort of. In the original manga, Bulma had purple hair, but in the anime, it was changed to blue. However, Trunks still has purple hair, which has changed to blue when his adult self came back to the past in Dragon Ball Super. Additionally, when he fused with Goten to become Gotenks, their combined hair looks a lot like Vegeta's. So, you could say he has both his parents' hair. Yeah, it's pretty confusing. What isn't confusing, however, is the fact that Trunks also definitely has his father's scowl, his angry eyebrows being present since he was a baby. As for Marin, she doesn't seem to have a nose, just like her father, and also like Krillin, she's depicted without the whites of her eyes. We've pointed out time and time again that Half Saiyans are shown to have far more potential than their parents. Not all of them have used said potential, but it's clear that Gohan, Trunks, Goten, and even Pan all have a lot more power than their parents did at their ages. In fact, that's why Gohan was the first to achieve the Super Saiyan 2 form, why Trunks and Goten were able to go Super Saiyan at such a young age, and why Gotenks is able to go Super Saiyan 3. Suffice it to say, another rule that all the warrior kids follow in Dragon Ball is that they have far more potential at a much younger age than their parents did. Gohan is the best example of this, since he beat Cell after unlocking Super Saiyan 2 and was able to annihilate Buu in battle with his ultimate form. However, Pan is also a great example of this, since she, flew out into space as a baby and carried the Pilaf gang with her. There is no way Gohan had that much power as a kid, showing that with each new generation, the warrior kids of Dragon Ball just get stronger and stronger and have more and more potential. This next one is probably the strangest one on the list, and it's the fact that every kid featured in the main cast of Dragon Ball has had one parent die at least once, be it before or after they were born. Let's roll down the list again. Both of Goku's parents died, as did his adoptive grandfather. Goku himself died in the Saiyan saga, leaving Gohan in the care of Piccolo, and later Goten was left without his father following the Cell saga. While we don't know what happened to Krillin's parents, we've never heard of them, so it wouldn't be too crazy to assume they're not around. As for Trunks, his father sacrificed himself in the Buu saga, which means Bulla falls into this category too. Next up is Marin, Krillin's daughter. You know, the character who is known for dying the most in the series. Yeah, she definitely fits into this pattern. While Gohan has never died in the series, Videl did die during Buu's assault on Kami's tower, meaning Pan also fits into this category. It's a very strange pattern, but one that's also pretty interesting, adding to the many tropes that the kids of Dragon Ball follow throughout the franchise. Beerus is kind of irritable. Okay, he's very irritable, and because of this, he can be kind of hard to please, and nothing impresses him very much. That said, there have been a few instances in which the God of Destruction has shown respect or admiration for someone or something. So let's take a look at some of the times Beerus was actually left impressed, be it because of power or because of his gluttonous nature. Meeting Goku. Perhaps the best way to tackle this subject is to go in chronological order, starting with Beerus' first interaction with Goku. Upon awakening from an almost 40-year nap, Beerus found himself craving to fight a Super Saiyan God. So he sought out Goku, who he believed could tell him about the concept. Although Goku didn't know anything about Super Saiyan Gods, no surprise there, he did manage to catch Beerus' interest by challenging him to a quick sparring match. Beerus was surprised and rather impressed by the offer alone, but he also showed some respect, if you could call it that, when Goku showed off his power. Goku had mentioned the power of a regular Super Saiyan and described it as he went through his transformations, acting somewhat proud of his own power, which is why he offered to stick with Super Saiyan 2 when fighting Beerus. Despite the fact that Goku was so arrogant in front of him, Beerus was still rather impressed with Goku's abilities, at least to an extent. Rather than just scoffing at Goku's strength, he actually stated that the power of Super Saiyan wasn't just talk, which implies that he was at least a bit impressed with Goku's transformations. At the very least, Beerus wasn't expecting this kind of power coming from a mortal, but he did end up beating Goku with just a few moves. Vegeta's Rage Power. We've covered this moment from Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Super a number of times, but this time we've got a different angle. The infamous Bye Bulma moment from Battle of Gods and Super is great for a lot of reasons. Mainly because it showed just how much Vegeta cares for Bulma, going into a rage when she got hurt. In fact, that rage gave him a crazy power-up, pushing him into Super Saiyan 2 and granting him additional anger-fueled strength. With this power, Vegeta went after the person who hurt his precious Bulma, fighting Beerus with his rageful wrath. What made this moment so impressive, both to the viewers and Beerus, was that Vegeta actually managed to hold his own against the God of Destruction. Heck, he did more than that. He actually beat Beerus to a pulp for a little bit. This moment of power didn't go unnoticed, as both the other partygoers and Beerus were impressed. Once Beerus had gained control of the fight, he stated that it had been eons since he had to use 10% of his power. Fighting a Super Saiyan God. After a lot of diversion, waiting, and patience, Beerus finally got to face the likes of a Super Saiyan God. After having dreamt about it, Beerus woke up wanting to fight a Super Saiyan God, and was more than ready to see the power that a Super Saiyan God had, and it pretty much lived up to his expectations. In fact, Beerus was downright impressed by Goku's Super Saiyan God form, for a number of reasons. First off, Beerus was impressed by Goku's lack of fear before their battles started, since he had so badly humiliated Goku in displaying his strength prior to his Super Saiyan God transformation. The second reason that Beerus was impressed by Goku's Super Saiyan God form was, as you probably guessed, the power that came with it. Although Beerus still only used a fraction of his power throughout the fight, it was clear that he was impressed by Goku's strength and skill. Goku's Perseverance. Right up front, it was made clear that the Super Saiyan God transformation was only temporary, and after the time limit was up, Goku lost the red aura that the form granted him. However, he didn't lose the power, at least not all of it. Somehow, Goku was able to keep a semblance of the godly power and channel it through his normal Super Saiyan form, a precursor to Super Saiyan Blue that ended up giving Goku some extra time in his battle with Beerus. With this power, Goku continued the battle with just his Super Saiyan form, and since he no longer had the power of a god, Beerus was both surprised and impressed with Goku's perseverance. But you could probably say Beerus was more annoyed than anything else, because Goku still managed to get some hits in on him that he wasn't expecting. That wasn't all though. Goku also showed Beerus that his power was more than just the result of godly ki. He showed him that he just didn't give up, and always pushed his limits. A perseverance that was just as impressive as his battle power, which had to have impressed Beerus, since he told Goku to stop a number of times, only for him to continue the battle. Suffice it to say, Goku had done a lot to show that he was more than just your average mortal, impressing Beerus all throughout their fight. Frieza's new power. Frieza and Beerus have something of a past. It was revealed in both Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Super that the Galactic Conqueror more or less answered to Beerus on a number of occasions, and as such, they're familiar with each other's power. This can be seen in the fact that Frieza's still very much scared of Beerus when he notices him on Earth, and when Beerus noted that Frieza had gotten stronger. While this didn't directly state that he was impressed by Frieza's power, it was pretty much implied that his new golden form surprised Beerus. Frieza had gained this form by training for the first time in his life, allowing him to access a temporary power-up transformation that managed to raise the godly eyebrows of Beerus. Respect for Master Roshi. Fast forward to the Tournament of Power, and it's much easier to find moments where Beerus admits he's impressed at the power, skill, and performance of mortals, or at the very least, moments where he shows pride in the warriors of his universe. One of the many examples of this came in the form of Master Roshi, who managed to do a whole lot during the Tournament of Power. On top of resisting the urges of a lovely lady, Master Roshi proved that he still had what it took to be relevant in a world of God-powered Super Saiyans and alternate universes. Roshi managed to knock out quite a few fighters during the tournament, and once he had run out of steam, he gave in to his exhaustion and fell off the side of the arena. Upon awakening in the rafters, Master Roshi was rewarded by a respectful compliment from Beerus, who referred to Roshi by his title of Master, a gesture that more or less stated he was impressed and proud of the old turtle hermit's efforts. Goku masters Ultra Instinct. Ultra Instinct is a very difficult technique that allows the user to fully give in to their body's movements and reactions, taking thought out of the equation to create the perfect instinct-based combat style. The concept of Ultra Instinct was introduced in the Universe Survival Saga, and by the end of the Tournament of Power, Goku had mastered the form, even if it was only a one-time deal. Ultra Instinct is notoriously difficult to learn, and even more difficult to master, since even the gods have trouble perfecting the technique. As such, it came as quite the surprise when Goku not only managed to use the technique, but master it within the time of the tournament. When Goku finally unleashed the power of his mastered Ultra Instinct form, he received a standing ovation from every god in the stands, a sign of respect for the mortal who managed to master the technique they themselves had not. Beerus was obviously one of the gods that stood in respect for Goku, but that wasn't all he did. Goku's mastery of Ultra Instinct also managed to put a big smile on Beerus's face, the destroyer grinning at Goku's determination as a means of expressing just how impressed he was. Suffice it to say, Beerus had come a really long way from flicking Goku's forehead to standing in respect for his skill and power. Gohan earns a smirk. Master Roshi wasn't the only warrior that earned the respect of Lord Beerus, as Gohan managed to do the same later in the tournament. Gohan did a lot to help Team Universe 7, pushing past the sidelined weakling label that fans had placed upon him throughout the rest of the series. On top of making one of the greatest comebacks of all time, Gohan also impressed Beerus with his tactics and numerous eliminations. Once again, the stubborn god didn't openly admit that he was impressed, but it was heavily implied by how he complimented Gohan's work during the tournament. After helping defeat Koichirator, Gohan was complimented by his father, while up in the stands, Beerus said, "Well done, kid," which might not seem like much, but he quickly corrected himself by calling Gohan by name, showing he respected him and his actions enough to do so. Sure, it isn't the most impressed sounding compliment, but again, Beerus is a stubborn guy. The fact that he showed even a bit of respect towards Gohan was itself impressive, putting a nice little cap on Gohan's character development through Dragon Ball Super. Earth's food. Outside the realm of battle, there's one thing that always guarantees to impress Beerus: Earth's food. From the second he arrived on Earth, he was treated to and fell in love with the planet's cuisine. In fact, it's pretty much the main reason that he doesn't destroy the planet, and thanks to the efforts of Bulma, he continues to be so satisfied by Earth's food that he keeps the planet intact. Because Earth has so many different kinds of delicious food to offer, Beerus is constantly impressed by the new flavors and food items he gets to try, both because of how good they taste and because of how new and different each dish is to him. Suffice it to say, while Beerus might be hard to impress when it comes to power, skill, strength, or any other battle-related attribute, he's constantly impressed by the wide variety of food that Earth has to offer. Future Trunks' training. By the time of the Future Trunks saga, Bulma had built a device that allows her to form a barrier around two warriors whenever they decide to fight near Capsule Corp. Unfortunately, Bulma wasn't able to get the barrier up right away, so the dueling auras of the two Super Saiyan 2s caused some weather problems downtown. In fact, Future Trunks' weather-changing barrier-requiring power was so impressive that Beerus made note of it. Though he didn't specifically say he was impressed, he and Whis did have a short conversation about Trunks' power, starting with Beerus mentioning that the time traveler was stronger than he had anticipated. In other words, Future Trunks broke Beerus' expectations, a rare occurrence that implied he had managed to impress the God of Destruction on some level. That said, Whis and Beerus' conversation ended with them noting that Trunks' power still managed to come up short, and that Goku Black seemed to be the more interesting warrior in this whole time-traveling mess. And those were some of the times Beerus was actually impressed by someone or something in Dragon Ball Super. Were you just as impressed as the God of Destruction was in these moments? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more Dragon Ball videos. Thanks for watching.